Is your business protected against the threat of malicious litigation and frivolous lawsuits? Are you sinking company profits into marketing campaigns that do nothing to contribute to the growth of your business? Bottled Business Sense provides practical business perspectives that uniquely emphasize both legal and media marketing strategies to protect and ensure the longevity of your business. Now, whether you're trying to provide a startup business with some level of stability or an established business with foolproof asset and estate protection, or simply attempting to get a better return for your business marketing dollars, Bill Bernard and Rick Moscoso will expose potential pitfalls to ensure the security and growth of your business, free from unwanted expense and the threat of litigation. You'll learn how to implement marketing and protection tools equal to those used by today's most successful corporations. Let's join Bill and Rick for today's Bottled Business Sense show.
My name is Bill Bernard, and I'm one of the co-hosts of the Bottled Business Show, and we're here again on Tuesday morning at 10 a.m. Another, what I hope to be a power-packed show for all our business owners and entrepreneurs out there. As everyone knows, our show is geared around the promotion and protection of the small business owner, and we try to give both legal and marketing tips to help the business owner proceed along the journey of prosperity, and you know, that's what we do, and that's the free advice that we give out on a weekly basis. So, having said that, without further ado, let me introduce my co-host, Mr. Rick Moscoso. How are you, Rick?
Hey, good morning, Bill. I'm doing great. I'm excited for today's show, but before we get into that, it's what a great day out there. We're finally getting some sun here in Southern California. Doesn't feel like Seattle anymore, you know.
No.
Seattle's bad. I love Seattle, but
you know what I couldn't figure out is the entire month of March and April, and I actually kept track of this. The entire month of March and April was extremely beautiful, and then from May 1st all the way to like May 25th, it was just horrible. And now we're finally starting to see a little sun, so hopefully the spring and the summer are going to come in the way we hoped and anticipated.
yeah,
You know, before we get into the show, Rick, as you were mentioning, I want to just indicate to the viewers and listeners, I'm currently on call for trial. I'm doing the show today, hoping that it's not interrupted. But if the court calls me and I need to leave abruptly, I want everyone to understand Rick will be taking it over with our guests that we'll introduce in a minute, but just to give everyone a heads up on that. Speaking of our guest host, we have a great one, Rick. We've had him on our show before, and we're really looking forward to having him. Why don't you tell us all about who we have today?
Yeah, I'm really excited, Bill. Steve's been on our show before. He's an excellent resource that takes takes similar content to what you and I speak about on the show, but more on a personal, get down and dirty, grassroots type of level. And I learn a lot from Steve, and I know as well as you, he's been a friend of ours for quite some time now, and I really respect the advice that he gives us, and I'm really looking forward to the next series of four episodes that he's going to do with us. Steve is a business coach here located in Southern California, and he has clients virtually all over the world, and is a vetted friend of ours and business owner of Growth Source Coaching, and has done numerous radio shows here in the Southland. He's a member of the Chamber of Commerce in Lake Forest, California, here in Southern California. And just the accolades go on and on. He's just a great resource, and I know I am, as well as you are, Bill, excited to have him here on the show. So with that being said, we could talk all day about him without having him speak one lick, but that's not what we're here for. Looking forward to hearing what Steve has to say. So why don't you take it away, Bill, and bring Steve onto the show.
Mr. Steve Smith, you're now on. I bet you thought there for a second you weren't going to get on the show at all, the way we were gabbing, huh?
You know, I thought this was great. I mean, I could just sit here and watch and listen and not have to do anything.
Well,
but thanks for having me on.
Listen, we're happy to have you. I know we decided we were going to have you on for a 4-week span of time, and I know you've got a lot of great things planned for that period. And I know today we're going to speak a little bit about, maybe extensively about goal achievement. And why don't you tell us why, Steve, off the top, why is this subject so near and dear to your heart?
The reason that I speak to a lot of groups, and I write articles, and I try to get the word out as much as possible about the whole concept of goal achievement, is because the one thing I find with many of my clients and other colleagues and people that I hang out with in this business is that you either are predisposed to wanting to achieve the things that are most important to you in your professional life or in your business, or you're not. It's fairly cut and dried. And unfortunately, the vast majority of us fall into the latter category. We might get some great hits now and then. We might get one big zinger for the year that we want to talk about for the next 2 or 3. But when it comes to making goal achievement a lifestyle choice, a way of working continuously, there's not enough people that do it well. And unfortunately, without achieving goals that you set for yourself, it's very hard to move anything forward. Your career, your business, anything that's of real value and passion to you, you have to be able to move your progress and your benchmarks forward in order to eventually get to that dream position that we all like to talk about.
Well, why do you think that is, Steve? Why is it such a challenge to get people to decide and then move forward in achieving their goals? I mean, what's the roadblock?
I think there's a couple, and the two probably the most common is that, and you guys have probably participated in this or at least seen this, because most people that go to New Year's Eve parties witness this. Folks, they get imbibed and they have a great time, and then it gets around to, after everybody says Happy New Year's, people start talking about their resolutions for the next year. And, you get typical things like, gee, I want to lose 20 pounds, or I want to get in shape, or, I want to run a marathon, or something like that. Things are kind of thrown off the top of your head because they either sound good to other people, or it might be something that you've always thought about but never given any real serious consideration to. The problem with that is when you do that over and over again, and then you put it aside, you forget about it, you don't do anything meaningful towards it, you start conditioning yourself to do that on a regular basis. Throw out an edict, throw out a commitment, but then not really worry about it, because if it comes, it comes. If it doesn't, well, I'll just tack it on next year. And I think what we all do over time is we train ourselves not to be serious about wanting to achieve what we tell ourselves is most important. We go through the motions, but nothing happens.
Now, I would assume, and I'm probably going to be correct on this, that you probably have come up with some sort of a process that you can recommend for people.
I have.
So they can make this change, this important change in their life.
I have, and it's taken quite a while, and it's based on a lot of research and a lot of personal observation with people that I've worked with, just to basically try to get to the root cause of why people don't develop that serious, ongoing, focused, determined commitment for actually achieving a big goal. And quite honestly, sometimes when people actually know that they're not going to do it, what they tend to do is they tend to back them down. So now goals become smaller and smaller. They become less meaningful. The problem is the behavior doesn't go away. So you still end up with a pretty poor batting average. You're just shooting after a lower mark.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, would it be, and I think Rick and I were discussing this, weren't we, Rick, where we said that a lot of times, I was relaying to Rick, I believe, a story about a great marketing person that I made contact with many years ago, and this person would literally write down goals that they wanted to achieve and hang it on a board right in their office, so when they sat at their desk it was the first thing they saw every day. That's the goal I'm going to achieve. And I'm assuming you could probably put time limits on it or things of that nature, but is that pretty the most simplistic way to go, Steve? Something that put their mind to it?
Yes. What you're describing is having a vision board. And if you go on Google and you type in vision boards, you'll get all kind of products and websites and things that'll tell you how to do it. But it's based on the principle that your subconscious, which is kind of the computer hard drive in your head, its only real function is to collect data about everything that goes on in your life and try to create a life, kind of a path, based on what it sees that you should be on. And it makes no judgments about what's good or bad, right or wrong. It only collects what you get involved in, things you read, things you watch, conversations you have, experiences, all that stuff just kind of gets coded in over your whole life. And at some point, you develop habits and behaviors and viewpoints that are all a function of that. So the question is, if you're predisposed not to really take goals serious, not to really try to move forward and accomplish things that are really meaningful and noteworthy, the first thing you got to think about is, how do I change my own behavior? And one of the ways to do it, and I can talk about this a little later too, one of the ways to do it is to create a vision board which kind of talks to your head on a regular basis about what you want, so that it now gets the idea that maybe this is more meaningful.
So, Steve, clarify that for us, for our viewers. When you use the vision board, well, how do you get it to speak to you if you're not a very good goal achiever in the first place?
Well, of all of the sensory data that you take in, that your head absorbs every single day, the most powerful of the senses is your vision. It's sight. It's things that come in through what you look at. And so the whole concept behind a vision board is, if you're very clear with pictures and words that you put on this board, it's like a big scrapbook page, you know, that you put on a big board and put it someplace in your office or your home, and you look at it on a regular basis, your mind starts to absorb the images that they see, and they start to equate that with something that you want. The reason why it doesn't have to speak to you audibly is because, again, your mind makes no distinction between what's real and what's fantasy. Great example of this is when you go to a movie. You go to a movie that's a romantic movie, it's kind of a tearjerker, it's got a dramatic ending, you know, everybody cries and weeps. You guys have all been to those kind of movies before. Well, it's not real. You're watching it on a screen, but the emotions that get driven as a result of what you're watching are real. And it's only because your subconscious is reacting to things that it sees without deciding whether that's a real situation or that's something made up. So that's why the vision board has power, because it can serve to do the same thing. Implant mental images into your head on a regular basis, so that eventually your brain gets the idea that this must be important because it keeps seeing it, and it now starts helping you focus and commit and be more dedicated towards getting what you want.
What part of would you say your clientele, what percentage maybe, Steve, of your clientele that you deal with has goal positioning problems? In other words, I'm assuming you probably deal with goal-oriented clients who need help in understanding how to get there. But have you actually taken on clients that need help realizing their goals? In other words, finding out what goals they actually need to be aware of before they actually set out to achieve them?
Yes, and most of them are either in a situation where they don't really know what their goals are or should be. They're just kind of operating on, this is what I've always done, so I'm going to keep doing it. Or they've actually gone to the trouble of putting their goals down on paper, but then they just put it aside. It gets lost in the pile with a bunch of other paper, and they never really look at it or take it to the next step of saying, okay, now that we've identified that this is meaningful, this is something we really need to accomplish, let's sit down and figure out what path we need to get on in order to get there. So whether you don't formalize them or you don't do anything after you formalize them, the end result is the same.
So here's the key question then. So if you're helping somebody do this, or maybe somebody's trying to do this on their own, how do you suggest the person stay accountable to those goals or to those things that they've jotted down?
Well, once you've assigned a goal, the first thing you need to do is put it on paper. Once things are on paper, they're formalized. Okay. then you get a chance to sit back and instead of just recounting what you've said in your head, you can actually look at what that goal means and allow it to kind of absorb itself into you and say, okay, this is what I've committed myself to. I've put it on paper. That's step one. Step two is to start looking at what things do I have to do in order to reach that goal. Every goal worth accomplishing or spending any amount of time on usually has component parts to it. It's that old saying you guys have probably heard that you can't eat an elephant in one bite. You have to break it down and you have to decide what is going to get worked on first that will be the foundation or the springboard for the next phase of the goal. And those things need to get put down on paper. And at some point, once you've decided what the elements are, then you need to assign a time that you're going to complete them. And there's other things that go into that, but it's a very structured process that has to support a very emotional, an emotional situation, because setting and committing yourself to a goal is an emotional thing. And most of the time, if you don't figure out how to really bind yourself emotionally to what you want, then you're going to treat it like everything else that gets in front of you, and it's here, and later on it's someplace else, and gee, I forgot what it looks like, and now it's out of sight, out of mind, I'm on to something else.
Well, hey, Steve, before we go on with the rest of the show, let's take a brief intermission and allow our listeners and viewers to find out where they can get a hold of Growth Source Coaching, where your information is, and in case somebody does want to get a hold of you.
I have a website out there, growthsourcecoaching.com. You can visit that. It will tell you everything about who I am and what I do. There's plenty of resources on there and things that you can read about. If you can connect with me on LinkedIn, that's always a good place. I have a lot of connections there, and that's a great way to contact me. Or if you really just have a question, you want to know a little more about what the whole coaching process is like, you can call me on my direct line. It's 949-951-9163. That's my direct office line, and we can have a chat. I talk with a lot of people who are just curious. They want to know, gee, if I commit myself to this process, what's it like? Because a lot of people have never really had coaching, and a lot of people that have had it haven't had all that stellar experience. So I would much rather them call me up and find out what they could expect to get into before they ever make a decision.
Sure. And I think Rick will probably have Steve's contact information at the bottom of the screen for when the show becomes permanent online, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Right below the video, we'll have all of Steve's resources.
Okay, good. Back to the show. Steve, I remember before the show we were chatting a little bit, and I wanted to see if we could get into this a little. And you may have already touched upon some of this, and if you have, please just let us know. But I think we were discussing a 6-step process that you developed. I think you said that. I think I'm correct in that. I know we were talking about a process that you developed to help get people on the right track. What's that process involved, and what are those steps?
Well, the 6 steps that I created are basically designed to get people to change and perfect a behavior pattern that allows them to be more achievement-oriented in whatever they choose to go after. Okay, could be a personal health goal, it could be a business development goal, it could be a professional development goal. But whatever it is, regardless of what it is, if you incorporate these 6 steps, it will put you in a much better position to actually get the results you're looking for. So that's the reason I did it. If you're not interested in getting the results, then you don't have to waste your time doing any of this stuff. Actually, you know how a lot of times when people come up with systems, there's like a first letter of each word, and they try to come up with some fancy little acronym that you can market. Right. Well, I played around with the first letter of these 6 words, and I didn't come up with anything. So, I even created tiles, like you see on Scrabble. Oh, and, yeah. So I tried to move them around, and nada, nothing. So so I just said, okay, well, that's not going to be a factor in this whole process. But the first thing that I talk to people about is whatever the goal that you want to set for yourself. The first thing is it has to be meaningful. That's what the M stands for. There has to be a real purpose in why you've decided to take that challenge on. And the reason that meaning is so important is because the critical aspect of being able to achieve anything is you have to be willing to take action. If you talk about stuff all day long and you never do anything with it, then you're not going to get the results you're looking for. Action is the linchpin between formalizing it as a commitment and getting the results. Action is driven by emotion. It's not driven by logic. It's driven by emotion.
So you're willing, in other words, you're willing to take a risk.
Yeah, but you have to be able to say to yourself, I have to figure out a way to make that goal an emotional tie to me, because that's what's going to drive me and make me willing to take action. Here's a great example. Have you guys ever been to known anybody, like a family member? Well, both of you are married, so you can probably go back to your own days. But do you know what it's like when you go through the process of planning a wedding?
Yeah, I know exactly what the process is like because I got married later in life, so I was I guess I have to better say, in case anyone's listening, I was a willing participant.
Yeah, I wouldn't know because we eloped, so it was easy.
All right, so my daughter got married 3-4 years ago. During the entire time when they got engaged and she announced and they put a date on the calendar, it was like 9 months out, she became a fanatic for everything weddings, because she had a goal at the end of that day that it was going to be just so, and there were going to be the whole atmosphere and everything was going to be exactly the way she had it pictured in her head. And so everything she did was very methodically driven towards that day. That was the crescendo of her goal. So if you've ever been involved in the planning of the wedding or known somebody personally who's gone through that, you know what emotions can do to drive you towards an outcome that you're looking for. So it's so important to figure out how to connect yourself with that goal in some meaningful, emotional way. That's step number one. If you can't do that, it's going to seem like drudgery. It's going to seem like it's so task-driven, and at some point, probably before you get there, you're just going to lose interest. So something else more important is going to get in the way, and you're going to cast it aside, and you're going to go in another direction. And that's typically what a lot of people do. They lose interest, 3/4 of the way through, and they give it up, and they go to something else. And it's only because they never really develop the kind of emotional attachment to the goal they had set to keep them on track long enough.
And I would assume that part of the coaching process, for some people anyway, not all, but for some, would be identifying what emotional or what passion you have that's going to make that emotional connection, because I would think that there's some people that may not even know that, right, Steve?
Well, goal setting and goal developing is talked about a lot. And I'm sure you guys have heard of the acronym SMART. Specific, measurable, actionable, reasonable, time specific. Okay? Those are great ways to formulate what a goal should look like when it's written down. The problem is, what happens after that? What happens after that is what I'm talking about. How do you take that goal that you've just spent a lot of time formalizing and writing on paper so that it meets all those criteria? What happens then? What do you do to keep yourself on track? Some of these goals, the bigger, the more complicated, sometimes it might take an entire year. And you say, by the end of 2015, I want my business to be at $500,000 a year. And currently you're sitting at just a little over $300,000. That's quite a chunk. That's a pretty big, hairy goal to go after. But if you can't figure out, other than the numbers, why that goal is important to you, what's important about hitting $500,000, then you're probably going to have trouble staying on track long enough to see it through, and at the end of the year, oh well, we didn't make that, so we'll stick it on the goal for 2016.
Okay, so you have the meaningful goal, step one. At the risk of jumping ahead, Steve, would I be correct in saying that somewhere along these steps there's going to be the word patience, that you're going to have patience?
Yeah, you know what, Bill? I think patience is a virtue, but for a lot of people, it really just needs to be a measured level of expectation. Okay, if you know a goal is going to take the rest of this calendar year to meet. We've got 7 months left. Then you need to have expectations about what's going to get done along the way, so at the end of the year you arrive. But if you think that a 7-month goal is going to get done in 30 days and you're impatient about it, you're probably going to short-circuit your own efforts.
Yeah.
So hey, so Steve, how do you set a timeline or a achievement, or establish an achievement chart, or so to speak, with a client? So, and then how frequently do you check in with them to make sure that they're moving in the right direction to achieve that specific goal or goals?
Okay. What I do is, once somebody's identified the top end goal, the finished result, I have them go back and just on a sheet of paper list all the specific steps or things that they need to accomplish along the way to put themselves in a position to realize that result. And once they have that linear list, then we go back and say, okay, how long do you think it'll take to cover each one of these things? Sometimes it may only be a week. Sometimes it might be 30 days. It depends on whether it's a task or more of a process. And once I get them to figure that out, that kind of gives you an idea. If they were to do everything linearly, one after another, here's how long it's going to take. But many times, you can actually look at goals and say, okay, I can do goal number 1, and I can also do goal number 4, because even though they help get me to the same end line, they're not dependent on each other in terms of doing one before the other. So when you start stacking them like that, sometimes you can compress what might look like 4 months worth of work into 2.5, because now you're doing, disparate activities at the same time. So that's the way I help try to vet what somebody has achieved as a time limit, to say, number 1, okay, your time is perfectly normal, you'll be able to do it, or you're probably going to need a little more time given all the steps you've identified that need to be done. So that's really more the mechanical side of it, but it's really important, because if people at some point feel like they've set a goal and they've set a time limit and the time limit is totally unrealistic, that's another way to just kind of sabotage your head and get you off track and get you onto something else, and before you know it, you've lost interest.
Just in case people are keeping track of this as we go along, Steve, have we hit on any of the other steps that we need to identify? I know we said meaningful goal. The goal has to be meaningful, and then what would be some of the other steps?
Well, step number 2. Step number 2, which you kind of got into a little earlier in the broadcast, was you have to have a vision. Once you've established that goal and you put it on paper, you need to have a mental picture of what the outcome is going to look like. If you can't see it in your head, you're probably not going to be able to accomplish it in reality. And that's where vision boards can really do a lot in terms of helping you to crystallize what that actual finished look looks like. I mean, after all, think about this. A lot of people, when they build a home, the home of their dreams, what's the first thing they do? They go out and they hire an architect.
Right, to plan it out, right?
Right, and the architect gives them a drawing. He might do a 3D rendering, then he might do the actual blueprint that the contractors work on. But at some point, when you're done, you're looking at the picture and you're saying, yes, that's it. That's what I want. Somebody's captured it visually. Now you have something to look at, which just reaffirms, yes, that was the right move. That's what I want. That's what I'm willing to go after and spend the time and the money to get there. So you've got to create a vision of what this outcome looks like, or it's going to be real difficult, to get exactly what you want when it's all over.
Actually, I think, Steve, the vision part of it would help enhance, if you will, the meaningful part of it. In other words, the better you can see it yourself, maybe the more meaningful it becomes to you and the more you get excited about it.
You know what? If there is a visual component to your goal, you're absolutely right. A lot of times in business, people set goals that, hey, our accounts receivable was way off the chart this year. We've got to cut that in half and keep our outstanding, payments down below $100,000. It's kind of hard to add a visual component to that. But and a lot of things in business are like that. They're very numerically driven. So anytime you can get beyond that and be able to say, okay, if I was able to recoup $300,000 in outstanding payments and keep my receivables down to maybe no more than 30, 45 days out, what would that do for the business? What would that do for me? Am I going to sleep better because now I know I have the cash flow to operate the business? I don't have to keep going back to the bank and asking for more money to make payroll for the next cycle. Those are the kind of things you need to think about in terms of what it actually is going to do to you or for you, as a means of saying, yeah, we need to really go to school on how to fix this and then actually do it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I don't know how we're looking on times, Rick. Maybe you can fill us in on that in a second or so, but I wanted to continue on and go on, because I really think I love structure, and I have a feeling that a lot of our listeners and viewers like it as well. So we've got about, say, 10 more minutes left in the show, Steve. So after the meaningfulness of the goal is set and you have a vision of it, what would be some of the other steps to complete this whole process that you'd want to go through with clients?
Okay, then the next obvious step is the plan. Okay, getting the plan written down. The reason I say this, and I like to draw on examples of other things that people are exposed to in life. I grew up as a kid learning how to play chess, and I know a lot of people play chess. There's chess clubs, chess organizations, world tournaments. The fundamentals of chess is being able to see moves several moves ahead, and if you have a well laid out plan, and you know that what you're working on today is going to influence something that you have to work on 3 or 4 steps from now, it greatly enhances how well you do with each part of your plan, as opposed to just going through the motions to get something checked off and off your list. So having a plan that takes you from where you are now to that end result just fortifies, these are the things I need to do, and these are what I need to do well. So that's the other piece that can help you realize and achieve the goals that you're looking for. Then you move into this really interesting concept that I've only recently been doing some research on, and it's the whole concept of rituals. If you guys have ever played sports, I'm sure many of your listeners have been on sports at some point in time, you know that a lot of major athletes have rituals that are baked into their season. Before they go out and hit the field, they go through certain rituals which they've practiced over and over and over again, and it mentally gets them into a state of peak performance. Business owners are no different. If you've got to make a big presentation to a company because you're trying to land a deal, if you're getting ready to public speak in front of a crowd of 300 or 400, you've got to be in peak performance. You've got to be at the top of your game. Well, the best way to be able to get there on a continual basis is to develop rituals. And sometimes having rituals can really make the whole goal-setting journey much more active, because you know how to put yourself in that peak performance when you need to.
So, Steve, give us an example. In your case, you're going to make a big presentation to the chamber or something like that, or you're pitching a firm for your services. What would be the ritual that you go through to prepare?
Okay. I do 2 things. First, I do as much research on the people, the organization, the reason I'm there, because I want to be totally comfortable that I know as much as I can about who I'm talking to and what I'm talking about. So that's my one way of kind of putting myself in that peak state, because let's face it, a lot of presentation, and whether it's public speaking or giving a workshop or a webinar, is basically your comfort with what you're doing and who you're talking to. So that's number one. The second thing I do, because I have a tendency sometimes to be a little too formal, a little too stiff, what I do is I vision myself down on one knee talking to my grandchild. Because when you're talking to a small child, it tends to soften you up. It tends to make you a lot more, a more nice, more humble. You don't have that kind of overbearing kind of delivery style that many people can lapse into because they get nervous. And so you come up with something that can really just kind of loosen you up. And then when you go out there, you carry that with you. And I think it's much more personable. People, they love listening to or working with people that they think are personable, that they like, as opposed to somebody that's too rigid. So those are 2 things that I do now, and it works really well because it puts me at ease. Then I don't have to worry about, gee, if I make a mistake, I say a wrong word, I lose my mind, any number of things that can kill you right in the middle of a good speech.
Okay, so after the ritual is in place, or the set of rituals, Steve, then what would be the last few remaining steps that you'd want to take a client through?
Okay, there's two things left. And this next one I'm going to tell you about, to me, is for an independent business person, someone who doesn't have a lot of folks around them on a day-to-day basis. This one is a game breaker, okay? Find yourself an accountability partner. Find someone who you trust and who wants similar things that you want. Maybe you have a collaborative style goal. Both of you are trying to achieve the same thing. Somebody that you know that when they work with you, when you talk with them, you get genuine value out of it. And the whole reason you do it is because you want to set those little intermediate benchmarks, and you want somebody else to hold you accountable. We are all, as humans, really bad at holding ourselves accountable. But if we know we have made a commitment to someone else who's going to call us on it a week later, we're a lot more liable to go through with the action, with the work, and get that step, that phase of the goal done. So don't try to do all this stuff yourself. As business owners, sometimes we get so prideful about what we do, we don't want to let anybody else in. And if you can find that person as a good accountability partner, it can just fast forward your progress like you're probably not used to doing.
Yeah. And at the risk of saying that a business coach would be a pretty good accountability partner, let's find out, because I'm sitting on the edge of my seat here. What is the final step that you have to go through, Steve? Because I bet you it's going to bring everything together, I have a feeling.
Yes, and this part is something that, again, I find way too many people don't pay too much attention to. Many times they get the benefit of it from a surprise basis, but they don't actually initiate it. And what I'm basically saying is find your own inspiration. Learn how to get inspired on a daily basis. It's the personal renewal that gets you back up and in the game and keeps you going that most people have trouble with. They have trouble staying on the journey long enough. And when they don't, it's because their own energy bank just runs dry. The best way to do that is find things that inspire you. Whether it's listening to music, whether it's watching certain videos of other people that you respect and admire, whether it's going out and doing something completely different and working maybe in a charitable organization that you just love, because it's a completely different thing. Whatever allows you to get the energy and the fulfillment for yourself back, that's what you want to build into your schedule. One of the things I love, every morning I get up, I walk my dog. I got this greyhound, and all he does is sleep and eat and want to get walked every day. But I can take him around the neighborhood, I can plug in my iPod, I can listen to some Eric Clapton, and by the time I get back in the office, I'm wound up, I'm ready to go. And it's because I've found things that can give me that emotional uplift, that can kind of clear up my head and renew my focus on things, that keeps me operating at the level that I want to operate. If I didn't do anything like that, the business and just life in general just has a way of beating you down to the point where you just want to give up. That's the reason a lot of people fall into situations, because they don't find ways to renew themselves.
Yeah, and I would add a 6B to that, or maybe even a number 7, for people out there who are spiritual people. For me, spirituality and things of that nature really help inspire me and get me moving every day. So that could be either a form of number 6, or it could be a number 7 or a 6B, or whatever you want to term it. If you incorporate that in my opinion, for those out there who have those beliefs, I don't think you could go wrong.
No, look, like I said, that's all part of the things that inspire you to want to keep going, to want to do better, to set a higher standard for yourself. That's a big part of it. And once you start getting used to that, practice makes permanent. Once you get used to these things and you continue to do them, and it becomes more of how you operate on a day-to-day basis, all of a sudden you start finding out that you're knocking your goals down. You're crossing things off the list. You're seeing the benefit of these results. Your business is actually moving up, and it's staying there, which is great. You know, the difference between growth and an increase is usually followed by a decrease. You know,
right.
But with growth, it's a systemic going up, and that's really what you want out of either your personal career, your professional career, or the business you run.
Yeah, absolutely, Steve. I couldn't agree more. Well, I hope in ending the show, I hope everybody realizes the value of the free information they've just been given. You know, this is a tremendous amount of great, straightforward, to the point information that really, I think, presents a challenge to a lot of business owners out there, because I think there are some out there that are just not sure of what goal setting is, or maybe hasn't really considered it as in depth as we presented it here today. So I want to thank you, Steve, and I want to also get in the just couple minutes we have left, because I know we're butting up against the end of time here. Could you give us just a quick rundown, Steve, in 20 words or less? What's next week's show going to be about?
Next week's show is going to be about another related topic to this, and it's what I call power up your routine. You know, it's great to have goals and be on a track to achieve them, but a lot of times people's regular routine, their ability to be productive, to get through the day doing the right things, tends to fall apart, and there's a whole host of reasons for that. And a lot of times, if you can figure out how to make your daily activity focused on the right things, you're getting the right things done, you're having the time to enjoy things along the way, and you're not going to bed at night all stressed out because you just don't know how you're going to get through it. If you can accomplish or overcome that, that can change your entire perspective on what it means to be a business owner. So to me, that's so important, because I see the difference between people who generally have fun at tackling the challenges of being in business, and the other people that just succumb to it and they hate life as a result of it.
Well, I'm looking forward to that. I know Rick is. And before we close the show, any final thoughts, Rick?
No, this has been great. I mean, I really get intrigued, and myself, I apply a lot of these principles that I've learned over the years from guys like Steve and other very successful business owners, and it makes a difference. You know, you get too many gremlins that are crawling around in your head that are trying to push you in the wrong direction.
Right.
Right. It's good to have somebody like Steve to be accountable to, or whoever your accountability partner is. It's well worth doing that.
Absolutely.
Well, again, Steve, many thanks. We're going to look forward to seeing you again next week. This is a 4-part series, so next week will be part 2, and hope everybody tunes in to listen to get, again, this valuable information that normally you just can't go out there and find for free, much less live and in person. So, again, thanks, Steve, and we'll look forward to seeing you.
Guys, thanks for having me on today. I look forward to more of them.
All right. We'll see you next week, Steve.
All right.
All right.
Okay, take care, everybody.